Today I have with me Dr. Ravindra Mehta, Chief of Critical Care Pulmonology and Intervention Pulmonology, Polo Specialty Hospital, Jayanagar. He is a prolific doctor, a well-known clinician and a researcher in the field of chest and ICU medicine. Welcome, doctor. Our topic for today's FP Live is our health in COVID times, what's on the new horizon? Doctor, going to the first question, is the COVID situation really dreadful or is it a media hype?
No, so this has been now talked about recently that when we saw the situation. So our first learning curve was what is happening in other parts of the world. We saw the Holocaust happening starting from China, which now seems much less compared to the rest of the world. And then it went on in a very horrible fashion to Italy, Spain, the United Kingdom, and the United States, which has a record number of cases and 100,000 deaths and so on and so forth. And so then we got worried, and when we looked at the mathematics for us, as told to us by the epidemiologists, and the numbers were crunched, we got really concerned, and that started the anticipatory run for beds, ventilators, arrangements, and an India-wide preparation, so to say. Now, what's happening is when data is coming on the ground, we're getting more realistic, and it looks like the sick people are few. The death percentage, when calculated, is not that high. The worldwide average was talked to be around 3.5 or so. India is way below that right now. The United States is much higher. But those numbers are actually a function of how many cases you test, how many of them reach healthcare and get tested, and then how many die. So there's always going to be some flawed statistics. Bottom line is we are still left with the original message that most people with COVID-19 infection will be okay. The immune system will fight it off. Few will require hospitalization, maybe 10-15%, and require oxygen therapy and regular medications. And very few will hit the ICU, less than 5%, out of which 1% may require ventilators. Those numbers are still holding in some way or the other. So the overall mortality of COVID-19 is not bad compared to other things we used to, like flu, tuberculosis, and so on. The problem is the speed of the whole thing because it is highly infectious. So if you take that highly infectious component and then put it to the fact that many people will hit healthcare at the same time, then it becomes a problem. Where are we seeing that? Typical prototype currently is the hot states right now. Maharashtra or Mumbai, look at Mumbai right now, who is exploding with COVID-19. And similarly, Delhi, Tamil Nadu, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and so on and so forth. Different cities are having their own problems. So that is where suddenly large number of cases hitting healthcare, and because we realize that the infectivity paradigm reduces the number of beds, reduces the staff available, and that's when the concern is coming up. So yes, on a global scale, if you're sitting in a room and crunching numbers, mortality is not bad. On an individual city scale, if the numbers really get overwhelming, it becomes a problem. So this is where we stand. Take home message, it's not bad. For you and me, if we take precautions, it's not bad. It's only when we get into that overwhelming stage is that when we have to worry about it.
We are in the fourth phase of lockdown. Where do you stand as a disease progression?
Yeah, so that's extremely interesting. India has probably one of the largest, longest, earliest, largest, and longest lockdowns which have ever been seen worldwide when it came to COVID-19 prevention. And India did what it had not done in so many years when it came to preventive care. We instituted the largest, most effective, strongest strategy for prevention, which is lockdown. The problem is entering lockdown made a lot of sense. The exit is going to be a problem. And so when we entered, we put all the precautions. There was everything else. There was enthusiasm. There was understanding. There was education. And that has been going on and on because now India is behaving like different countries. But we understand this. If you take a population of 1.35 billion, we are roughly around 20 Italys or 4 Americas. And so different parts of the country are behaving differently. For example, in Maharashtra or in Mumbai, the lockdowns only doing so much. Despite the lockdown, the cases are increasing. A case can be made that if we had not put the lockdown, what would have been? It would be really horrible. So Mumbai's lockdown has its own problems. But for example, in Karnataka or other parts of India, it's working very well. We don't have a lot of cases. Our cases in Karnataka are less than Dharavi by themselves. So in such a situation, it's working. So now it's coming to a point where no longer a central diktat will be completely applicable. Recommendations will come for the center, and then states will have to take it up and decide what is the advantage of the lockdown. Is there any sense in continuing? Have the endpoints of trying to keep people apart, social distancing or physical distancing, education, masks, and healthcare preparation met. And then at that point, this lockdown will have to be opened. Already in our city, for example, we're talking from Bangalore, it's opening in a big way. We're starting everything, normal activities are being resumed, and now we're testing the waters to see that can we have both normal and economic recovery at the same time, see what is the impact on COVID-19 disease and spread. We're holding well so far.
What is in the horizon when it comes to COVID pandemic, doctor?
Yeah, so it's $1 million question, and again, it's like you could spend days looking at this and trying to wonder what's going on because your bottom line is the information you're getting from different countries. So if you look at it worldwide, clearly the ones who were the horrific ones, most of them are now plateauing out or getting better and better. Started with China. The China is the leader of the race. Started, spread, done, and now they're dealing with how to start normal life and still deal with the upcoming COVID cases. You look at the other parts, Italy, the Holocaust and the horror is now settling, it's much better. So also in the United Kingdom and similarly in the United States. But United States, of course, is still going up, but it's plateauing out compared to before. But we can't compare these numbers because all these countries first saw COVID-19, then their healthcare system tried to manage it, and then they put in measures such as lockdown, and that too incompletely if you see the US and so on. So it's coming to a stage where India was completely different. We first put in a lockdown, and then after that, we're opening the lockdown and seeing what happens to our COVID-19 cases. In some cities, the lockdown has had minimal impact. In certain other states and cities, it's had a tremendous impact. So as we go ahead, the fate of this pandemic in our country, which is what matters the most, will be decided on where you are. If you are in the hotspot, high prevalence, lockdown, minimal effect area, you have your work cut out for you and the whole system. If you are in an area where the lockdown has worked quite a bit and the cases are not a lot, the work cut out is how to resume normal life. So it's like a race now. In the marathon, different people are at different points. Some are still struggling to just deal with COVID-19. Others have crossed that and are struggling with how to restart life, economic starts, and of course, what we are trying to call the new normal.
While everybody is quite aware of COVID and they're trying to cope with it, the general question that people tend to ask is how do I protect myself and also survive the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, so it's the most important thing. How do we take the fear of the worldwide phenomena? How do we take public health and put it to ultimately what matters selfishly to most people? What's going to happen to me, my near and dear ones, my family, and the circle of life which I exist in? So now again, it comes down to where you are. If you are sitting in, like we said, repeat, Mumbai like high spot areas, there is nothing else but lockdown and minimal movement at this point. Essential existence of a primordial nature still going on there. But if you're sitting in areas which are restarting life and the economy, then it comes down to whatever you have learned from the lockdown, you'll have to implement. So what you did, what you heard, those magic words, mask, distancing, and sanitization. So all these three words will have to be now implemented into every area of your life. So if you're going to work, it's how you are interacting with your workplace. If you run systems and workplaces, how are you doing facility management? If you are part of a high infective system in healthcare, how are you going to protect yourself and protect your patients and so on? So the triangle of or the triangle of you, your work, and society now is being explored in every area. Bottom line, as I said, it stays to those three words which have been maximally, I think, used in this decade and maybe century. Masks, appropriate mask utilization, appropriate social or physical distancing, and sanitization will be the benchmarks. If you do that and otherwise you're healthy, then you will be able to easily protect yourself. The elderly currently are still being discouraged to come out because of the higher risk of COVID-19, both acquiring and getting severe COVID-19. So that's called reverse isolation. Your concern about going out and getting back in also has to be tested. If you follow these three and come back in and continue precautions, by and large, you should be okay. So this is where we stand. As a responsible citizen, I don't think that anything needs to be told to us anymore. Your part or my part, I have to do myself. Interaction with my workplace, with society, we have to depend on others. But with such a mass awareness never seen before in the history of mankind, we think we are reasonably prepared to handle this infection. And this infection itself is telling us that if you do a good job with all this, by and large, the effect on the population should not be as bad. There's a lot of good hope and a lot of positivity coming out when it comes to restarting our lives with a much greater understanding and a much more established acceptance and implementation of these basic things.
Who is at higher risk of COVID infection?
So that's a very interesting question. It started off from the beginning that who is going to get COVID the most. So we always think of three categories: the pediatric population, the elderly population, and this can be variously defined at different ages, but at least 65 up started to be a concerning number. And then the healthy, the middle population is actually the most mobile and the most active. So pediatric population, fortunately, not bad at all. It turns out incidence is less. The ability to fight it off is actually very good, and pediatric hits have been very few. In the midst of all this came reports from the US that some kids are getting delayed effects of COVID-19, but they're few and far apart. By and large, children seem to be doing quite well. And why is that important? Because that is the class you can't control. You try your best to try to tell them to do all this social distancing and masks and sanitization, and you will see how utterly helpless and limited your efforts are going to be. So the good Lord and COVID fortunately doesn't affect them a lot. You take the elderly, and it was found out that because of age and the immune system going down, and you throw in all the risk factors of diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, lung disease, immune suppression, and so on, the mortality started to scale up. So after 60, it started to go up to anywhere from 2 to 3% and hitting a good 10 to 15% above the age of 80. So those are the people who are still vulnerable. Each risk factor such as diabetes, blood pressure is adding a small percentage. So if you do your own risk analysis, it's age, comorbidities and so on and so forth. And that is the issue going on. So that population is still vulnerable, and that has become a major problem from multiple endpoints. One is how are they going to get out and mingle, which is a problem. And they used to mingling. I mean, we created a society where the elderly are happy when they go out, they mingle, they're looking so healthy. 80-year-olds are actually doing much more than they ever did before and so on. So that has been a major concern. The second is the young population going out are worried about getting the disease back to the elderly. So that's been a second concern. And third is if they get admitted to hospitals, then certainly their outcomes are not as good. So those are the vulnerable people at this point. Having said that, the initial horrific numbers are not panning out as much, and the percentages have been dipped a little compared to what came out before. And you can understand that the initial reports of COVID-19 or corona are from countries who never saw this coming. If you get a horrible disease and then you are figuring out what to do and you report your numbers, it is like some preparation but not a whole lot. Now that people are better prepared and understand it more and are doing more for both for precautionary and treatment aspects, we think that the outcomes are going to be a little better if you put everything into place. But for the ballpark advice, kids okay, but schools are not going to start for a long time. The middle population, very low risk of anything happen. They're going to go out, mingle, and get the job done when it comes to both serving our regular life and economy. The elderly still stay in reverse isolation, and the ones with the risk factors have to look at them and decide the risk and accordingly move on.
Doctor, there's a very vague question which says, how is COVID patient treated? Is it by design or by default?
So it's
Is the recovery by design or default?
It's a clever play of terms, that design or default. So it's a virus. For the last so many years of healthcare, we saw healthcare exploding, and we know that what has happened in healthcare in the last 30, 40 years did not happen for literally 1900 to 2000 years. Those are the advances. But having said that, ladies and gentlemen, virology or the science of virus treatment has not moved a lot. So we have very few medications for the old viruses, hardly one or two and 1 to 3, if I can count them on my fingers. And COVID-19 had nothing. So we've taken old medications from the closet like chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, and trying to use them. Antivirals used in HIV and so on, because HIV is a virus, has been tried to be utilized here. We've tried immune therapies such as plasma and so on and so forth. And steroids have also been looked at in a certain phase of COVID where we think that the problems are due to your immune system and not entirely due to the virus. So a lot of science in progress. What is unique is its publications are coming like crazy. If I'm not mistaken, around 1500 to 2000 come per week. The number touted is 50,000 plus publications have come in. So it's as confusing for us as for anybody else. But bottom line is very few medications are there. None of them at this point are categorically there. Very recently, we've got remdesivir, one of the antivirals you guys must be knowing, which has been approved, but we are still waiting on the ground to see concrete action. So hardly any medication, but we know that if the patient gets supported well, if you get oxygen on time, if you go sicker and if you get these other therapies on time, certainly some impact is coming. So to put it in a nutshell, nothing concrete, lots of new stuff happening, moving very fast. Some combination of that along with your immune system seems to be working decently, at least for a good deal of the population. So between the immune system, science, supportive therapy, medications, and as you're trying to put down default or luck, we are able to impact on the mortality of COVID-19. And I'm sure when this is, done and dusted, we will realize that the initial reports and the later care was leading to improvement. Component part of it, what actually made a difference, we don't know. And that's why we say healthcare has to be ready with all these things. You've got so many tools in your closet. You have to use them differently based on the art and science of medicine to get people better. Good news for you is most people who are asymptomatic or who have minimal involvement, just some fever, body ache, myalgia, will not have a problem. Few people, as we started this session with, are hitting the sick cycle. So by and large, most of us are going to be quite okay. If we can't say that to you with confidence, we can't come to healthcare every day. It is with that knowledge and that confidence and the ability to manage areas is what we're trying to transmit as a thought process, as to give people confidence that this is something which is so far manageable with rapid work on the ground to get new tools in the pipeline.
Doctor, there's been this line that we've been hearing. What is meant by a patient being asymptomatic but tested positive for coronavirus?
So that's your screening, right? You discover it's highly infective. So today I have COVID-19. I come in contact with people and they have not been protecting themselves with this word PPE or personal protective equipment. That means a simple mask and so on. And so they are tested and they're found to be having COVID-19 in their nose throat area, but they have no symptoms at all. And this is currently 80% of India. This comes when you do a terrific and intensive phase of contact screening. And that's what. So we've had a people who were affected or who were being screened because they either came from abroad from a hotspot area or they are migrants or something in those lines. And then their contacts were screened. So it turns out this asymptomatic part, which was talked about as 35 to 50% in worldwide. Worldwide, they're saying one third people are asymptomatic. But when we get into preventive mode like India had, most of the people have been asymptomatic. The role of asymptomatic people, what we worry about is that they're still infective. But let me assure you that their infectivity is way, way, way less than somebody who's active COVID. That is established for a fact. But since we can't take a chance, these asymptomatic people have been first hunted for, then isolated, and then they go through the 2 week cycle, which is the time for the virus to go away with your immune system to fight it off. So you turn non infective and you're not going to spread the disease. So we are in this weird phase where we saw this asymptomatic part being a major part and putting all our energies to keeping these guys away so as to try and prevent active COVID from hitting our population in a big way. And by the way, you don't need treatment at all. Asymptomatic people can sit happily, eat their food. The only thing is they can't mingle with society. As of current understanding, down the line, this may change also as we realize that the impact of these asymptomatic people is not bad. But as of now, that's being followed.
What is the standard treatment protocol followed for COVID-19?
So I think we talked about that by and large. It's a question of, first of all, where are you at? Are you just one of those asymptomatic people who just need isolation and nothing else, or are you part of a disease spectrum? So the whole classification is there. It's a technical classification. Bottom line, if you are suffering from fever, your oxygen falls, you're suffering from what is called progressive COVID-19, then you will merit hospitalization. If you still get sicker, then only those questions like ICU and all come up. So at each stage, asymptomatic, just mildly disease, nothing required. Just what you and I do for the regular virus. Rest, eat well, hydrate yourself well, and all those things about vitamin C, zinc, arsenic album in the homeopathy spectrum. Many other naturopathic things talked about. Each part of India has got some naturopathic cocktail which was brought to our attention also. can be taken. None of us know it helps or not. So please take anything which you think is healthy. But by and large, the disease is going to run out its own course. By it is going to go away with your immune system fighting it out. If you get sicker and you reach a hospital, then a bunch of medications kick in. I don't think we need to discuss that, but you've heard all those names. Hydroxychloroquine, an antibiotic called azithromycin, an antiviral which is still not there, available with us. We think of steroids in some patients, and this plasma issue which was also touted a lot. And then ultimately, if you're on the machine, there's a whole bunch of strategies too. A lot of talk was there on people should not be ventilated and so on. It's all the initial hype. It's how we all jump the gun and get our 2 minutes of exposure out there, trying to tell people what to do. These things are important to look at, but at this point, nothing different from good regular conventional care is required to support these people when they get sicker and get them out. So it's a whole treatment protocol. Interesting part, changing literally on a week or bi-weekly basis. Also interesting, the role of these blood thinners, which have been talked about. So that is also being looked at, but nothing extraordinary or too much out of the way. It is science and progress. Also, differences in opinion. You will not get standardization out there. Even in the United States, we find 2, 3, 4 centers. We do network with our colleagues there. They are trying using different protocols. So it's part of an evolving science. When an evolving emergency comes, treatments are put out, different brains are fluctuating in their particular application, but all in all, things are done so as to improve the care of the sick patient.
Doctor, there's a question that Chittaranjan is asking. Will the HCQS medicine help a preventive measure? And also he wants to know what HERD immunity is.
Yeah, so COVID will go down as one of the most controversial, rapidly controversial and confusing entities which hit us. And that's obviously natural when you see something spreading rapidly. It's a virus for which minimum work has been done. The news has led to everybody from the non-clinical epidemiologist to the clinical person to the paraclinical person to the lay person. And you have social media as the largest vehicle is propagating with to both add information and throw in a pinch of confusion and a pound of concern and fear. So this has been an unusual cocktail which will be, I think, the hallmark of COVID. HCQS quickly jumped on by ICMR because it's an old medication with antiviral and anti-fever action. It also reduces your fever. Quickly approved for prevention or prophylaxis, all but restricted to healthcare providers. Healthcare providers that do with active COVID duty, not to ones just not doing COVID duty and sitting at home. Second is active people taking care of COVID patients, they should get it. These were the two major areas. ICMR recently expanded the criteria to include many more people at this point and even included frontline healthcare providers of any arena and so on. So HCQS has been endorsed and reiterated and reaffirmed by ICMR, which is our national body. Now the controversy starts. WHO took it off. Lancet, which is a UK journal, is telling us it's not there anymore. So again, it's work in progress. In India, we are following currently ICMR's recommendations. But of course, there are side effects talk. So if you are in the side effect spectrum, which is some heart issues and ECG monitoring and all, you should not take it. But since this medication has been extensively used in the rheumatoid arthritis population, it's quite logical to ask your doctor or if you're a healthcare professional to do the right analysis and take it at this point. But it is completely controversial with countries varying in their propensity. Trump took it on big time, and I think a whole Boeing went from India literally with hydroxychloroquine to supply the US. The US people themselves, whether as a scientific strategy or maybe a mild anti-Trump rhetoric, have not themselves endorsed it. So bottom line, lay people don't even think about it. Healthcare providers in the COVID arena can think about it. Taking care of COVID patients can think about it. Again, a space to look out and watch for.
How do we seek elective or emergency healthcare in COVID times, doctor?
So that's the most challenging now as we transition. We first said lockdown, great, stay at home. And those poor people who had emergency problems somehow, either postponed the problems, did their own therapy, talked to their doctors who must have given some goodwill advice, did these teleconsultations which suddenly sprung up. It was like, overnight we had this whole bunch of teleconsultations coming like flowers in bloom, trying to help people. So between that, people have tried to stay at home. But that can't happen. I mean, years and years of healthcare have shown that as the weather changes, as diseases, vary in their expressions, we will need healthcare. Heart diseases, diabetes, lung diseases, and so on will emerge and surface. So now people have got this fear that I don't want to go to a place, hospital, because it may transmit COVID. And so that's why they've not come initially. But now as the lockdowns open in a lot of areas, so there's two types of areas to reiterate. COVID areas are doing just COVID medicine. Mumbai is just putting out fires with COVID care, and other care is marginalized and getting minimal attention. Very similar to what happened in New York and everywhere else where we went through. Places like Bangalore and other places which have much less COVID are restarting life, and so people are coming back to hospitals for both elective and semi-elective. When of course emergent was always going on, and hospitals have made special efforts to make sure that they are COVID friendly. So unlike outside arena in the environment or in a crowded place, here of course precautions right from entry level screening to social distancing to sanitization to mask has been taken at very high levels. And the government at this point has tried to compartmentalize COVID centers, non-COVID centers, and so on. So we are much safer now. In case we feel that when we come to work, we probably have much less chance of getting COVID at work than getting it outside. So an attempt has been made by healthcare also to accommodate a change, which is patients returning back and taking care of them in a safe way for their primary conditions and COVID prevention also.
There's a question from Sindhu who asks, does everybody need to wear a mask to prevent the spread? Is there any evidence-based advice?
Yeah, so the initial thing was mask only for healthcare providers and only social distancing. And then tons of data came up that all these guys in the Middle East, Far East, and the Far East, especially Thailand, Hong Kong, Singapore, who had worn regular cloth masks, not surgical masks, not N95s, regular, hygienic, daily changed, daily washed cloth masks, which are comfortable, they will transmit the virus much less. So there's a 30 to 60% reduction in environmental transmission. It will not protect you a lot. It will protect the environment part, because you will, if you have any sort of asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic COVID carriage, you will not transfer it to the environment. So in case social distancing is getting violated, or it's not possible, or something is a problem, or it just doesn't happen, the mask was shown to give an additional element of protection. So again, CDC, WHO started saying mask not required outside, but with this information and the fact it's so simple to do, to just wear a simple cloth mask, the recommendation was changed, and now it's a well accepted worldwide recommendation, strongly implemented, to wear a mask, a simple cloth mask which is regularly washed and cleaned. Having said that, if you're sitting alone and there's nobody in a huge radius, you can take a call at that point, because whom are you going to give it to? Similarly, this major issue of people exercising with masks and all has been questioned also. It doesn't sound too logical to, as long as you can you can maintain this physical or social distancing. My personal opinion is you don't have to basically make yourself more uncomfortable and short of breath by trying to wear tight mask or mask in a phase of exercise and so on. So yes, masks are in, masks are there, masks are mandated at this point, will protect you, but in particular situations where it's uncomfortable or can be a health problem, it can be looked at from a different lens.
Okay, even Vinuta's got another question. It says, how safe is it to wear a mask for a long time? Will it not reduce the oxygen in the blood and also supply oxygen to the brain?
No, so regular cloth mask does nothing. With a little layer out there, it's basically just pretty much being the same. It's when we wear all these N95s, which are tightly placed for long periods of time in healthcare, is that we have to be worried. Because when these masks are there, that's when you can really feel the fact that you're not breathing out as well. And there have been subtle mentions of carbon dioxide rising, which can create problems if they're worn for prolonged periods of time. Lay population, you and I in a normal life, cloth mask comfortably worn, no issues at all. Only question is change daily, wash regularly. And if you're going that extent, please make sure all the people around you, your helps, your cooks, and your people who come to your house, they all also follow the same hygienic precautions and mask prevention. The science of maskology, as one would put it.
There's a sense of fear of going to the hospital, doctor. What's your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
we talked about that. So basically, like I said, it's not that. So you can't get into the cycle, right? I don't want to go to the hospital, but I'm going to postpone my health issues. And the hospital will say that, okay, people don't want anybody with COVID, so what do we do? So this had to be broken. It's broken. Hospitals have made extra diligent, meticulous, and major efforts to put in precautions. And I see it. I mean, I've never had so many masks and so many precautions in the hospital, right from the doctor to the nurse to the housekeeping people and so on, right? So right from entrance screening to systems in place to utilization of facilities to healthcare providers, huge efforts have been made to make people continue regular healthcare without risk of getting COVID, including engineering controls. At least the bigger centers have lovely air exchange units. It's called air handling units or AHUs, FHUs. We've learned a lot of engineering on the job, and these make sure that both the environment is pushing out the air and getting the air virus free. At the same time, protection is going on with sanitization. So I think all of us are adjusting on the ground. The same thing is for facilities. The same thing is for buses, planes, wherever people are cohorting. And so more and more effort has been made to make sure that wherever you're interacting with any place, especially now healthcare, more and more is being done to make sure that you are safe in this environment to get your regular work done.
Doctor, how does family support become a problem in COVID times?
Well, the problem is that if you're sitting at home, then by the time you got your COVID positivity, the worry is that while you're interacting with your people, that they themselves are going to be COVID positive. So many repercussions come in. First is, of course, how to take care of them. If they're stable, then it's fine. They're sitting in the room, then you have to put a whole bunch of systems into place, how their clothes are washed, how you're feeding them, the utensils, social distancing, and so on. The family members have to be very cautious over there. Elderly, we have to watch for deterioration also. So elderly often wind up, either thinking of admission and so on, but more and more efforts are being made to keep people at home. Second, thirdly, you need space. When it's great to talk of 2 meters social distancing, but 2 meters, countries are not made for 2 meters distancing. I mean, if you look at the cost of real estate in our locality, I'm told it's around 30,000 rupees a square foot. So if I take 2 meters out there, I'm talking of 1.5 lakh rupees of social distancing. So it's not always possible. In such a situation, you have to do what you can in your house. The government tried to give you isolation facilities so as to facilitate this. If you keep them at home, you try this, you look for your own health. You also will get tested over time if you have any issues, or you may get tested anyway depending on your state's policy, and you have to ride out that period. Then you have to get home supplies, you have to do all your sustenance of life, cooking. No help is going to come to your house. Your surroundings and your neighbors have to be helpful, and the government may come down and put a stamp on your door and quarantine you completely. So right from taking care of the person who's sick, to you yourself, to worrying about yourself, the fear, your neighbors, your supplies and your sustenance becomes an issue. It's a major thing, and people have gone through a lot because of these issues. By and large, I feel it's getting better. People are getting used to it. All these people used to go into hospitals. Hardly anybody is going into hospitals if they're stable, and they're encouraged to stay at home and ride it out. And system support, both on a logistic level and a humanitarian level, with volunteers and neighbors helping out, is getting better and better.
So one last question before we end the session. Some key messages you would like to give our audience?
Yeah, so these key messages are what it is. So if you asked us around 4-6 weeks ago, it was a different message that COVID-19 is a year, it's going to be horrible, stay at home. And every personality, big, small, whatever it may be, just told you to stay at home, social distance, wear a mask and sanitize. That's all we heard at that point. And the idea was have a mass understanding in a very small amount of time so as to prevent spread of this and keep people safe. Now things have become different, and this may change again 3-4 weeks from now. You can think of it in the same categories as we tried to mention before. You have to think of yourself, your family, the ecosystem you live around, which is your neighborhood and so on, your professional aspect, which is how do I get to work and so on and so forth. And most important and never to forget is your contribution to society. And that is all, because it's society which is moving like various cogs in a wheel. If we don't interact in the right way, we cannot fight this together. COVID-19 has shown us that a cohesive, cooperative collection of people can actually do much better than panic, fear, anxiety, and selfishness. So all these parts we have discussed partly. Self is how you take care of yourself. Family, as we already discussed. When you go to work, it's how you travel, facility arrangement and so on. So your employer kicks in at that point. As you go to work, it's societal interactions and how to deal with them. The humanitarian aspect is so important, whether it's migrant workers, taking care of people. If you have a chance, you volunteer, which is happening so often. In some way or the other, each one is contributing to this care. So keep yourself safe, keep your family safe. Go to work as much as possible now and do what you can within safety limits, which is and everybody is going to help you. do your contribution to society, and I would reiterate, repeat, and reinstitute. Be kind and compassionate. And we put out this in our blog. We have a blog called drravindramehta.com where we mention the fact that corona coexistence has to be there, which is all these components. Keep in mind there is two aspects to prevention: what you can do and what the system can do. The system has done what it has to do. No more is possible. Lockdowns are finished now. We're going to move back. So it's coming down to what you can do and what acceptance, which we didn't have in the first week or two. Acceptance of COVID-19, acceptance that by and large I'm going to be okay, acceptance that I have to live life differently, and people try to call it the new normal. I think let's accept it. It's not the new normal, it's acceptable abnormal, which I will integrate into my lives, put it into practice, coexist with my human beings, and as the famous phrase goes, this too shall pass. Hopefully, it will pass with safety to the maximal possible humanity, and we'll be able to pull ourselves up on all fronts. Initially, it was only COVID-19 healthcare. Now it's COVID-19 and economy and lives of the hit to lives from both sides. So we'll have to have a very strong understanding with strength and cooperation to pull out of this. I don't think it's impossible. Society and the world has seen many difficult situations. We're already getting better. If we integrate this sort of understanding into us, we have a very good chance of keeping both ourselves and the world around us safe, happy, and content. So that is what I would leave as a take home message.
So thank you very much for taking your time off and giving such a beautiful, enlightened and well elaborated session. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Anuruddha. Thank you so much. Bye.